If you're watching this video, you might be like me, someone who once believed that family is the safest place that loved ones would never hurt us. But what happens when the very people closest to us are the ones who push us toward danger? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on real-life stories as emotional and shocking as this one. Now let me tell you a story I never thought I'd be the protagonist of. That day, the San Diego sky was crystal clear. The sea sparkled beyond the large glass windows of the Grand Seaside Hotel, and the afternoon sun cast a golden glow on the white lilies scattered throughout the venue. My sister Emily's wedding unfolded like a meticulously directed dream, every detail carefully planned. The soft sound of the piano mingled with the cheerful chatter of over 100 guests. Women in colorful evening gowns glided through the white-carpeted halls, while men adjusted their ties, whispering old stories. I stood by the third-floor window, gazing at the dazzling scene below, my heart tightening, not with sadness, but with overwhelming emotion. Emily had truly grown up. No longer the playful little girl in a princess dress chasing me on summer days, she was now a radiant woman in a pristine white wedding gown, hand in hand with her new husband, Daniel. "Claire, you okay?" Mark's voice came from behind, gentle but firm. He was always like that, calm but present, exactly when I needed him most. Mark is my husband, a firefighter with smiling eyes and hands that have pulled countless lives from flames. We've been married for 12 years. The passion of our early days has faded, but what remains is a quiet, steadfast bond that nothing could easily shake. I turned to him, smiling. I'm happy. And a little overwhelmed. Like everything's changing so fast. He didn't say anything, just stepped forward and took my hand. His grip was warm and steady like a small flame in the heart of a winter night. "My name is Claire. I'm 41, a real estate agent in California, Emily's older sister and the eldest daughter in a family that long ago learned to accept that love isn't always distributed evenly. Emily and I, though raised under the same roof, were different in every way. I'm introverted, a bookworm, quiet, always the good child our parents never had to worry about. Emily was the opposite, lively, outgoing, the center of attention at every school party and family gathering. When our parents wanted to show off a daughter, they called Emily. When they needed someone to listen, they came to me. As a teenager, I was jealous, not because I wasn't loved, but because I felt invisible. That changed when my father was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. I dropped contracts, moved back home, and cared for him through nearly a decade of his final years. Emily was busy with her restaurant career, then barely around. I didn't blame her, everyone makes their choices. But Dad saw things differently. He came to recognize my quiet sacrifices. Before he passed, he held me inside. "You're the quietest gift I've ever had." I've never forgotten those words, and maybe Emily didn't either, but in a very different way. The wedding began at 4 p.m. I sat in the front row with Mom and Mark. As the processional music played and Emily appeared on Mom's arm, every eye turned to her. Under the shimmering light of crystal chandeliers, my sister looked like a goddess. Daniel stood at the end of the aisle, his gaze fixed on Emily. He was the kind of man any mother would want for her daughter, successful, calm, and seemingly caring. In the 6 months I'd known him, I'd seen no red flags. On the contrary, I was glad Emily had found someone who balanced her, and maybe anchored her to this family. As the couple exchanged vows, I couldn't hold back tears. I thought everyone deserves happiness, and my sister was no exception. Despite our past differences, today felt like a fresh start. I hoped that from now on, we could be two grown women walking side by side, understanding each other better. Mark squeezed my hand tighter as the guests erupted in applause. "You're getting emotional." I smiled softly. "Aren't you?" He winked. "I only cry when I eat spicy food." The reception followed in the hotel's grand ballroom. The food was meticulously prepared, the menu curated by Daniel and his restaurant team. Champagne flowed freely, and stories filled the air. Everyone thought this was Emily's perfect day, and maybe in a way mine too. A day to see my little sister, the one I watched, grow up, find her place, and smile genuinely. I didn't expect that in that moment of peace, darkness was already creeping in. If there was a moment I wished I could freeze in time, it was when Emily turned to look at me in the middle of the ceremony. Her eyes were brimming with happiness, and I instinctively smiled back. In that moment, I truly believed our old resentments were behind us. I wanted to believe that. Emily and Daniel stood together, hands clasped under an arch, adorned with cascading white orchids. Their vows, their tender glances, it was all like a movie, except this time I was part of it. But when Daniel raised a glass to thank the family, a memory flashed back sharp as a shard of glass cutting through the light. A few weeks earlier at a pre-wedding dinner, Emily had said something that seemed casual at the time, but now felt chilling. "Hey sis," she'd said, sipping wine and looking at me intently. "If something happened to you, how would the inheritance be divided?" I'd laughed, thinking she was joking. I replied offhandedly, "I'm not going anywhere, but I guess it'd go to you and Mom." She shrugged. "Just curious. Don't take it too seriously." But now, in the glittering wedding atmosphere, her question echoed back slow and deliberate, like wine dripping into a glass. Why did she ask that curiosity? Or something else? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease. I didn't want to suspect my sister on her happiest day. But that feeling, that vague premonition I often ignored, wouldn't go away this time. As I lifted my glass, Mark leaned in and whispered, "You okay? You look lost in thought." I smiled, lying, just thinking about Dad. And truthfully, part of me was back in the past. My father was a calm man, a high school history teacher who loved afternoon tea and war novels. To me, he was the only friend who truly understood me. In his final years as I cared for him between medication changes and late-night talks, he once said, "I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid that when I'm gone, you kids will lose each other." I promised him I'd keep the family together. But how could I have known that the one I needed to hold closest might be the one to hurt me the most? The wedding continued. People danced, took photos, exchanged toasts. Emily smiled more than ever. And I wondered if shadows were hiding behind that smile. There were small signs, her eyes darting away when I asked Daniel about their post-wedding plans. A few stolen glances between Emily and a woman I didn't know. I wasn't sure, but I felt it. And that's what kept me awake that night. No one warned me about the moment when everything could change in the blink of an eye. Every party reaches a peak of joy, and that's when people are most likely to let their guard down. The wedding reception was at its liveliest. Music filled the air, glasses clinked, and guests flocked to the buffet where dishes were presented like works of art. I sat at the table with Mom, Mark, and Daniel's family. On the table were white wine toasted bread and an elegantly printed menu with the words, "Welcome to Daniel and Emily's new beginning." Daniel was sharing a funny story about meeting Emily at an investor meeting, and the table roared with laughter. Everything felt almost too perfect. As I reached for my glass, I caught Mark's gaze. It wasn't his usual look. His eyes were tracking something or someone. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking toward the kitchen. I tilted my head slightly. He didn't respond, just furrowed his brow. His lips pressed into a thin line. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when he spotted smoldering smoke in a wall no one else noticed. A tiny sign, but for someone like him, it was enough. I followed his gaze and saw a chef white uniform hair neatly tied standing near the kitchen door eyes, quickly scanning our table. In a flash, they turned away. Mark set his glass down and pressed his hand on my thigh under the table. The pressure was light, but deliberate. "What's wrong?" I whispered, my stomach tightening with an unnamed dread. He didn't answer. But as a server wheeled out the main course, Mark stood abruptly. A plate of lemon butterfish was placed before me, intricately garnished and fragrant. Everyone around us marveled, but not Mark. He stared at the dish like it held a hidden code. He leaned close to my ear, his voice barely audible, but unforgettable. "We need to leave. Now." "What?" "Now, Claire. Get up. Don't ask." My instincts froze. I glanced around, no one noticed. Everyone was laughing, eating clinking glasses. No one suspected anything. Mom was chatting with Daniel's mother. Emily and Daniel were posing for photos at the head table. I looked back at Mark. His eyes weren't those of a husband, but of a firefighter who'd just spotted a hidden blaze in a crowded building. I stood, my legs trembling slightly. Mark took my hand, guiding me out of the chair as gently as possible. We moved quickly through the hall, out the main doors, blending into the crowd, spilling into the back courtyard. No one called after us. No one noticed. Only when the glass doors closed behind us did I speak. "Mark, what's going on? You're scaring me." He didn't stop. "Get to the car, quick!" My heart pounded. The air outside felt insufficient. Each step stretched like an eternity. I looked at Mark. His face was tense, jaw clenched. I'd never seen him like this. Even when rushing into burning buildings, he stayed calm. We reached the parking lot. Mark opened the car door, waited for me to slide into the passenger seat, then got in the driver's side and slammed the door shut. He didn't start the car. Just sat there. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I was on the verge of tears. "Mark, please, tell me what's happening." He turned to me, eyes still forward. His voice was low, almost hoarse. I saw Emily directing the chef. Clearly, she pointed to your seat. And then the chef pulled a small bottle from his pocket. No mistake, it was peanut oil. I froze. My peanut allergy is something everyone in the family knows about. I nearly died from it once. A single bite of food contaminated with peanut oil sent me to the ICU on oxygen for 2 days. No way, I whispered, my voice breaking. It can't be Emily. Maybe someone else. A mistake. Mark shook his head. I know what peanut oil bottles look like. I've seen them in restaurants sued over allergy cases. The label, the cap color, it was identical. And Emily, she confirmed your table with the chef. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. That fish dish, if I'd eaten it, just one bite. Mark reached over, squeezing my hand gently. I'm not sure what's going on. But I know one thing, I wasn't letting you stay there a second longer. I stayed silent, not because I didn't want to believe, because I couldn't. Emily, the little sister who clung to me during thunderstorms. The one who wrote me handwritten letters in 3rd grade when I went to summer camp. How could she... But Mark's look, the certainty in it, wasn't something that could be faked. I took a deep breath, but it didn't reach my lungs. It spread into a numbing ache throughout my body. I'd heard people say the greatest pain doesn't come from enemies, but from those we believe are family. I never truly understood that until I sat in that silent car as the San Diego night slowly descended. Mark still hadn't started the car. His hand rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white from gripping it tightly. I looked at him, waiting for the answer I almost didn't want to hear. Finally, he spoke, his voice so low I had to lean closer to hear. I saw her, Claire. It was Emily. I stayed silent, not daring to interrupt. My body felt frozen, but my mind was a storm of thoughts. Mark continued, his gaze distant as if replaying the scene. When I stepped into the hallway between the kitchen and the ballroom to call my station chief just a quick call, I saw Emily standing with a man in a chef's uniform. They were talking quietly. What stopped me was when she pointed to the seating chart on the wall. She pointed to table 4, our table, then leaned in and whispered something to the chef. I swallowed hard. My chest felt like an invisible hand was pressing down. I thought it was normal until I saw the chef pull a small bottle from his apron pocket. Brown bottle, pale red cap, peanut oil. No mistake. I've seen that kind in severe allergy cases at restaurants. I felt like I was falling into a bizarre dream with no way out. Every word Mark spoke was like a drop of water on my already fractured mind. You're sure? I asked. The question sounded pointless. I knew he wouldn't say anything unless he was certain. Mark turned to me. His eyes, honest, unwavering, left no room for escape. If you'd eaten that bite, Claire, you wouldn't have made it. My breath caught. Suddenly, I felt small, like a child curled under damp blankets, struggling to breathe through my first anaphylactic shock. I remember vividly the night I was 28, when I discovered my severe peanut allergy. It was a company year-end party. I ate a bite of salad with an unfamiliar dressing. 5 minutes later, my throat closed, my skin broke out in hives, my vision blurred, and I collapsed in the meeting room. If a colleague hadn't rushed me to the hospital, I wouldn't be here. Since then, I've always carried a medical alert card and an epinephrine pen as a last resort. Emily knew. The whole family knew. I turned to Mark. Do you think she knew what would happen? Mark didn't answer immediately. He nodded slowly. She's not stupid. She saw you go to the hospital. She knows how serious your allergy is. I gripped my thighs, trying to stop myself from trembling. Logic told me to stay calm, but my heart shattered into tiny pieces. I'd thought Emily and I could start over. I'd felt hope watching her in her wedding dress. But it turns out that light was just a facade. Beneath it was an abyss. I sobbed, Why, Mark? She's my sister. My sister. He didn't speak. He just pulled me into his arms. I leaned into his shoulder like a door blown open by the wind, unable to close again. When the pain subsided slightly, I sat up. Memories flooded back as if a cracked mirror was finally shattering. I remembered her strange question from 2 weeks earlier. If something happened to you, how would the inheritance be divided? I remembered how Emily reacted when Dad announced his will, 70%, to me, 30%, to her. She smiled, hugged me, said, You deserve it. I don't need much. But later, I caught her sitting alone in Dad's room, her eyes different. Mark spoke, pulling me back to reality. Claire, I can't be sure of her motives, but if you're okay with it, we need to check everything. Step by step. If there was intent, I won't let this be buried. I nodded. For the first time that night, I felt I wasn't alone. The car started rolling into the sea breeze-swept road. I looked out the window. Streetlights flashed by like memories being pulled from safety. I didn't know what lay ahead. But one thing I was certain of, I needed the truth, no matter how painful. That night, after leaving the hotel and driving in silence, Mark stopped at an empty coastal parking lot where waves quietly crashed against rocks under dim lights. We sat still, the car's AC humming softly. I thought the story was over, or at least the worst part was. I was wrong. Mark turned to me, his voice low and deliberate, as if carefully peeling back layers of a long-hidden secret. "Claire, there's something I hesitated to tell you, but I can't keep it back anymore." I looked at him, my heart tightening with a feeling I couldn't yet name. He continued. 3 weeks ago, Emily and I had a conversation while I was helping her move things to Daniel's place. It was just us in the garage. It started with wedding talk plans, decorations. But then she changed the subject abruptly. I swallowed hard. She asked, if something happened to Claire, what would happen to Dad's inheritance? It felt like a punch to the chest. Not because of the words, but because of Mark's tone, exact, unembellished. It was the same question Emily had asked me, but hearing it from Mark, I realized this wasn't innocent curiosity. It was a sign, a warning I'd ignored. I sat frozen, trying to balance emotion and reason. Mark continued, his eyes distant. I thought she was just curious. I answered what I knew, that you're the primary heir in the will, 70%, to you, 30%, to Emily. But if you passed before the estate was fully distributed, your share would go to the remaining heir, Emily. I turned away, staring into the darkness outside the car window. It felt like the air around me was draining away. I remembered the day Dad passed when the lawyer announced the will. He'd looked at me with a heavy gaze and said, "Your father left the majority to you because of everything you did for him over the past 10 years. Caring, sacrificing, staying by his side until the end." Emily sat beside me that day, not smiling, not angry. She just nodded, light as a feather. I understand. Dad had his reasons. I'd believed she meant it. Now I knew she didn't accept it. Not at all. Dad's estate wasn't vast, but it was enough for a comfortable life and long-term investments. 2 properties in Palm Springs and San Diego, a sizable savings account, shares in an investment fund. I never saw it as a prize for myself. To me, it was a reward for the love and responsibility I chose to bear when Dad was sick. But for Emily, it might have been a game. I said softly, "So, if I died, everything would go to her. No courts, no disputes." Mark nodded. "Exactly. And this time, when the estate is in the legal distribution phase, is the most sensitive period." I trembled, not from fear, but from betrayal cutting to my core. I turned to Mark. "Do you think she planned this?" Mark was silent for a long time. Then he answered, unflinching, "Maybe not a detailed plan from the start. But once she knew you'd inherit the majority, and the will was about to take effect, she started thinking further. The questions, the actions, they're all signs." I clutched my head. Everything in me churned. My sister, the one who once called me her role model, had turned me into an obstacle. "Mark," I whispered, "if this is true, if she really meant to harm me just for money, then what was the point of everything I did for this family?" He squeezed my hand. "It mattered. To your dad, to me, to your mom. And to you, the one who never lost her humanity. Love isn't wrong, Claire. Trust isn't wrong. Only those who betray trust are wrong." Tears spilled out unstoppable. I didn't want to believe it. But now, with all the signs piecing together like a full picture, I couldn't close my eyes. We decided to head home that night. Mark called a lawyer friend for advice. I sat in the passenger seat staring out the window at the city lights, unchanged, as if nothing had happened. But for me, that night was the start of a new reality. A world where I had to accept that kinship could be a mask, that I'd given my heart to someone unworthy. And the most painful part, I still loved my sister, even though she might have chosen the cruelest way to erase me from her life. I used to think the truth arrives slowly, like a polite guest knocking, waiting to be invited in. But sometimes it comes like a storm. Fast, fierce, merciless. 3 days after the wedding, Mark and I began the process of reporting quietly but decisively. Mark personally sent an anonymous report to the Grand Seaside Hotel's management detailing suspicions of intentional endangerment, specifically the use of peanut oil in violation of a reported severe allergy. The report included photos of the seating chart, the menu, the allergy list submitted before the wedding, and a description of the time and place where Mark witnessed Emily and the chef's suspicious behavior. I remember that night as Mark sent the report from his laptop in the living room. He barely spoke. He just did what needed to be done. But I knew behind his calm was a husband fighting not just for the truth, but for his wife's life. 3 days later, the hotel called. Not Mark me. The wedding manager's voice was serious, polite, and hesitant. Ms. Claire, we need to confirm a reported incident from Saturday's reception. An issue with the food we found something irregular. I sat silently on the couch clutching the phone. Specifically, the manager continued during an internal review. Following the report, we tested leftover sauce samples from the kitchen, corresponding to the pan-seared fish served that day. Results showed traces of peanut oil in the portion for table 4, where you were seated. I closed my eyes. Every word Mark said, every instinct now became cold, hard evidence from a lab result. The manager paused, then continued. We also reviewed security footage from the backstage area, and we need you to come in to verify some details. The next afternoon, Mark and I returned to the hotel. No flowers, no wedding. Just long, empty hallways and the faint smell of disinfectant. The manager led us to a small conference room. On a screen was footage from a security camera date and time stamped in the top right corner. I immediately recognized the hallway from the main kitchen to the ballroom. Within seconds, a familiar figure appeared, Emily. In the pale green silk dress she changed into after the ceremony, hair neatly tied. She was talking to a man exactly as Mark described. They stood by the seating chart. She pointed to it, then pulled a small brown bottle from her purse and handed it to the man. I clenched my fists as he nodded, slipped the bottle into his apron pocket, and they parted as if they'd never met. There was no sound, but the image was loud enough to drown out any doubt. Mark turned to me. He didn't speak. His hand just squeezed mine gently. It didn't stop there. The manager added, We checked the chef's phone. He's been temporarily suspended. There's a notable text thread. He showed me a screenshot. Emily, table 4, add a little extra sauce. The bottle I gave you earlier. Not too much. Chef got it. No one will know. Emily, I'll remember you when I open my first branch. My eyes lingered on that last line. Open my first branch. A joke or a promise. I remembered a week before the wedding Emily had hinted during dinner. If I had more capital, I'd turn the restaurant into a chain. Daniel's great at management, I'm great at PR. As for capital, I'll find a way. I hadn't paid attention. Now I saw how naive I'd been. The meeting ended with the hotel documenting the incident. They said they'd report to authorities if I requested. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to breathe, to grasp that this was real. On the way home, Mark asked softly, Do you want me to handle this for you? I shook my head. No, this is my story, and I won't turn away anymore. I'd lost trust, but I hadn't lost courage. That evening, lying in bed, I opened my phone and looked at an old photo me and Emily when she was 10. I was tying her hair and she was grinning ear to ear. I touched the screen whispering, You were once the light in my memories. But you chose to erase it with darkness. I knew it was time to face this head on. When a dream shatters, it's never loud. It's not an explosion. It's quiet like a falling sheet of paper or a broken sentence. Emily's wedding ended like that. No announcements, no chaos, just phone calls, whispers, and guests leaving earlier than planned. The official reason from the Hotel A suspected food-related issue. A few guests reported mild stomach aches and, for safety, the organizers ended the reception early to investigate food hygiene. But I knew it was just a thin veil over the storm brewing. As people left, Emily remained oblivious to the truth slowly surfacing. To her, it was probably just a party marred by an unfortunate mishap. 3 days later, Daniel, her newlywed husband, knocked on my door at 8 a.m. I didn't want to open it. I wasn't ready to face anyone tied to Emily. But Mark said, Hear him out. I think he's a victim, too. Reluctantly, I opened the door. Daniel stood there, pale as a ghost. Still in his wedding suit, now rumpled with dark circles under his eyes, like someone who hadn't slept in days. Claire, I'm sorry. I need to talk to you. Just once. I stayed silent. He stepped inside hesitantly, no longer the confident entrepreneur. Mark poured coffee, then left us alone. Daniel sat across from me. It took him a few seconds to speak. I didn't know anything about it, I swear. I looked at him, neither nodding nor objecting. Just silent. It sounds cliché, I know, but I truly had no idea what Emily was doing with the food. I just knew she seemed stressed before the wedding. I thought it was normal. I still said nothing. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, a copy of the chef's text messages provided by the hotel. He slid it toward me. When I read this from the investigation team, I felt like an idiot. She didn't tell me anything. Not a word about money or the will. His voice broke at the end. Daniel slumped, hands covering his face. I married someone I don't even know. For the first time in days, I felt pity for an outsider. Daniel, like me, was a victim of a beautiful illusion. A marriage woven with promises and smiles, but built on schemes and lies. I said softly, I believe you. He looked up, eyes red. You really believe me? I nodded. Because if I were you, I couldn't imagine the person I loved doing something like this. He broke down crying in front of me, not out of guilt, but betrayal. The next day, Mom was admitted to the hospital for low blood pressure and exhaustion. I visited her. She lay in a single room, staring at the ceiling, silent. You're here. Her voice was faint, unlike the strong woman in my memories. I sat down, taking her hand. I'm here. How are you feeling? She turned to me, her eyes warm but quiet. Then she suddenly burst into tears. I'm sorry, Claire. It's all my fault. I froze. She continued. From the start, I always favored Emily. She was weaker, more outspoken, needed more attention. You were always good independent, never demanding. I thought you were fine. I never truly saw your sacrifices. Tears fell, not from anger, but pain. Not because she favored Emily, but because she was hurting like me. I don't blame you, I said softly. We all loved Emily. But love doesn't mean enabling. Mom nodded, tears streaming. Keep living, Claire. Don't let this steal your heart. No matter what I know, you're the one who always put family first. I hugged her. It couldn't mend the past, but it could save the present. 3 days later, I got a call from Emily's lawyer. She'd been officially summoned for questioning. The case was no longer just a hotel matter. It had been handed to criminal investigators. I knew things were entering a new phase. Sometimes I wondered, is love strong enough to save someone from their own darkness? Or is it just a frail lantern trembling in the storm of human hearts? Daniel didn't walk away. While most inside and outside the family thought divorce was inevitable, he chose a different path. That morning I learned from the lawyer that Emily had been moved to a temporary detention facility pending investigation. Daniel requested to visit her first. He didn't tell me he was going. But that afternoon he knocked on my door as if needing someone to witness the biggest decision of his life. Claire, he said, I know you won't understand. Maybe you'll think I'm foolish. But I need to see her. I need to know who the real Emily is. And I need to give her a chance to speak truthfully this time. I looked at him, not judging. I understood. Some things once loved aren't easily abandoned. Daniel recounted the visit later that evening. We sat in the kitchen with hot tea and soft radio music. Mark sat nearby, listening quietly without interrupting. She came out in a prison uniform, hair tied back, no makeup. But her eyes, they were still the Emily I knew. Confident, proud, but this time there was something broken too. Daniel took a breath, staring into the distance. We had 20 minutes. She sat down, didn't cry, didn't beat around the bush. Her first words were, You hate me now, don't you? I lowered my head, my heart tightening. Daniel continued. I didn't answer. I just asked, Why? He paused as if letting the moment replay. She said she was tired of being second in her own family. Tired of everyone talking about her perfect, sacrificing sister while she was just a shadow. She tried hard to make Dad see her differently, but he never did. Even when he was sick, he only called your name. Daniel's voice softened. She said every decision stemmed from feeling unfairly treated. It grew and grew. When she learned about the will, she couldn't take it. All she could think was, if Claire's gone, everything will be as it should have been. I covered my mouth. My heart felt crushed. Daniel looked at me earnestly. Claire, I'm not defending her. No one should do what she did. But hearing her, I didn't see a criminal. I saw someone broken inside. I said nothing. Tears rolled down my cheeks, silent. I asked, What did you say? Daniel's eyes lit up as if finding himself again. I said, Emily, you were wrong. No one's born perfect. The question is, do you want to make it right? I looked up, listening intently. She looked at me like she couldn't believe what she heard. Then she cried. She said, If you don't abandon me, I'll face every consequence. I'm tired. I don't want to hide anymore. He paused, hands firm on the table, voice resolute. I won't divorce her. Not because I'm not angry or hurt, but because I believe someone can only change if they know someone still stays when they're at their worst. If everyone turns away who will hold on to the last shred of their humanity. Mark turned to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I understood. And for the first time since the wedding, I saw a faint glimmer of hope in this broken scene. That evening, I wrote in my journal a notebook I'd neglected for years. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving someone a chance to remember who they are. I wasn't ready to forgive Emily, but I didn't want to carry hatred anymore. I used to think justice came from the law, from wills, from numbers and signatures. But I realized true justice begins when people dare to face the mistakes they've made, especially with those they love. A week after Emily pleaded guilty, Mom called me home. No explanation, just come for dinner tonight. I need to talk. I didn't know what to expect, but her voice for the first time in years lacked control or authority. Only weariness. Mark drove me to the old house. The kitchen was still the familiar place where I'd stayed up cooking porridge for Dad, waiting for Emily to come home late, watching Mom peel fruit in silence. Dinner was simple: vegetable soup, steamed fish, steaming rice. No fanfare, no flowers. As I sat down, Mom looked up. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a heavy sky. "Claire," she began, her voice wavering. "I've rewritten my will." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "The will. I want to split the estate evenly between you and Emily. Though your father left most to you, I can't let it end like this." I froze, not because I cared about the money, but because I didn't expect this, especially after everything. "I know," she continued. "You have every reason to get more. You sacrificed for your father something Emily and I didn't do. I know you could refuse. I'm not asking you to agree, just to understand." I said nothing. A sea of emotions swirled: anger, touch, doubt, sadness. Mom was still my mother, though I hadn't felt that clearly in a long time. She looked down at her rice. "I loved you both wrongly. I thought your strength meant you didn't need as much love. I thought Emily's fragility meant she needed protecting at all costs. But I didn't see. My favoritism hurt both my daughters." Her voice broke at the end. In the silence, I heard a spoon lightly clink against a bowl, as if her hand trembled. I reached out, taking her hand. Despite the pain, the scratches, something in me softened. A long, empty space was filled by a small gesture. "Mom," I said, "if there's still enough love, we're still a family." She sobbed, no longer holding back like a child seeking forgiveness. And I no longer, just the silently sacrificing daughter, had learned to speak, to touch another's vulnerability without judgment. We ate in silence, but the air wasn't tense anymore. Each chew, each clink of dishes felt like a healing melody. After dinner, Mom quietly led me to Dad's study, now her reading room. She pulled a cream-colored envelope from a drawer sealed with the lawyer's stamp. "This is the official will I just signed. Everything split evenly. Not just the assets, but the responsibility. I don't want to burden you or take away Emily's chance to start over." I took the envelope without opening it. I trusted her. Before leaving, I hugged Mom. The first time in years. She held me tightly, as if afraid I'd vanish into the world she couldn't hold on to. "Thank you for not hating me." I whispered. I only hated the silence. "I never stopped loving you." That night back home, I told Mark. He smiled, not surprised, not skeptical, just his usual gentle look. "I always believed your family could heal." I nodded. "Not because everyone's right, but because no one refused to try again. They say behind a prison's high walls sometimes lies the start of an inner escape." I didn't believe it once. But Emily made me reconsider my own biases. When her sentence was finalized, 3 years for attempted poisoning of someone with a severe allergy, she didn't protest or defend herself. She bowed her head and accepted it. It didn't erase my pain, but at least I knew she'd begun the path she needed to take. Mark said, "Maybe when people truly face their darkness, they start to see how much they need the light." I didn't disagree, but I wasn't ready to open my heart yet. A year later, I received a letter from a state community outreach program. They were launching a campaign to raise food allergy awareness in schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. Among the speakers' names, one made my heart skip: Emily Thompson. I didn't know how to react. Anger, surprise, or a flicker of hope. I read her bio: former inmate, now a speaker and volunteer for acute allergy prevention programs. A small photo showed Emily in a simple white shirt standing before a classroom, holding a sign about allergy-causing oils. Her eyes were no longer proud, just honest and weary. I started hearing about her through local media. She joined nearly every activity in prison, reading, teaching literacy to inmates, working as a librarian. When offered early release for good behavior, she declined. I need to stay long enough to understand the consequences of what I did. Daniel stayed by her side, not as a husband shielding his wife from the world, but as a true companion. He abandoned plans to expand his restaurant chain. Instead, he volunteered for a non-profit providing safe meals for children with allergies. When a reporter asked why, he said, "I used to want wealth. Now I just want to live knowing I'm worthy." One autumn afternoon, I received a letter. Not from a court or lawyer. Just a plain white envelope handwritten with no sender's name, only a small note in the corner. From someone who once lost herself. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were neat, unadorned words. It was from Emily. "Claire, I hesitated a lot before writing this. I don't know if you'll read it, nor do I dare hope for a reply. But I had to write because if I didn't, I couldn't keep healing myself. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that every day in here, I think of you, not with envy, but with regret. I still remember the way you looked at me at the wedding, the eyes of someone who truly loved, truly trusted. And I betrayed that look. I'm not worthy, but I hope one day when I'm brave enough I can stand before you not to justify, but to say one thing: I'm sorry. I'm learning to be kind again. I hope you're still living in peace, with all the sincerity of someone who's made mistakes. Emily." I folded the letter. I cried. Tears fell onto the kitchen table where I'd waited for Mom to cook. Read to Dad held my pain after the wedding. For the first time, the pain wasn't sharp like a knife, but like a scar, healing still tender but no longer bleeding. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to see her. But I kept the letter in a wooden box by my bed, a sign that I'd left a door open. When winter came, Mark and I attended a small community seminar on food safety. The presenter was a woman with short hair speaking slowly but confidently. It was Emily. I didn't stand to greet her. I didn't signal recognition. I just sat in the back row, listening as she spoke about the consequences of ignorance and what it takes from both victims and perpetrators. "We can't erase the past," she said, "but we can change its meaning by what we choose to do from today onward." I don't know how long it'll take to approach her, but I know time is doing its work. Some wounds can't fade, but time, love, and sincerity can turn them into scars, reminders, not pain. After it all, I returned to my work real estate, a career I've loved for over a decade. Old clients and colleagues welcomed me back with warm, trusting eyes. I'm no longer the woman who hid in humility. I've learned to set clear boundaries while keeping kindness. An elderly client once said, "You're the kind of person who makes people feel safe stepping into a new home." I laughed, but my heart quietly thanked her. Mark remains my rock. No grand gestures, no need for words, just there when I need him. On tired evenings, he has chamomile tea ready toast-baked and understands what I need from a single sigh. "I can't heal everything for you," Mark once said, "but I'll always be here when you need a place to heal yourself." And he has, never letting go of my hand. I used my share of the new will to start a fund in Dad's name, Henry's Light. Not just for charity, but to support those caring for terminally ill parents like I did. I know the loneliness, the endless nights, the financial and emotional strain, the pain of watching a loved one fade. I want them to know they're not alone. That someone's been there and is still here, ready to extend a hand. Each month, the fund supports about 20 families with sick loved ones, covering medical costs, temporary nursing, and mental health support. I didn't expect that giving would become my own medicine. One spring day as cherry blossoms bloomed in the city park, Mom invited me for lunch. I was sorting files for a young homebuyer, a girl whose voice eerily reminded me of Emily. We sat in a small Japanese restaurant where Dad used to take us for special occasions. Mom held a steaming cup of tea gazing out the window. "Claire, she said I want to visit Emily, but I don't want to go alone." I looked up, not speaking right away, but I wasn't surprised. The visit to the prison happened on a cloudy Thursday. Mom wore her beige fall coat. I brought a small bouquet of lavender, Emily's favorite flower as a child. The visiting room was simple, with a glass partition and phones. But due to her good behavior, Emily was allowed a direct meeting, no glass. When she walked in, my heart raced, not from fear, but from standing at the edge of a painful past and an unknown future. Emily was thinner, her hair, short eyes, shadowed but familiar. She froze when she saw me. "Claire," she said softly, as if she couldn't believe I was there. I didn't speak. I just stepped closer. No explanations needed. No one said "I'm sorry" or "I forgive you." I opened my arms, and Emily fell into them like a gust of wind finding a sturdy branch after a storm. We hugged the first time since it all. No one cried aloud, but I knew tears fell silently on each other's shoulders. Mom watched quietly, then stepped forward, placing her hands on her daughters' backs. The three of us stood there imperfect, incomplete, but together. After the visit, Emily didn't say much. Just thank you. I left the flowers, and in her hand I saw a blank sheet of paper, perhaps another unwritten letter. On the drive home, Mom said, "Maybe today's a new beginning. No rush, but at least we've stepped closer." I nodded. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't forgiveness, but daring to start again, not knowing where it leads. A new spring arrived. Buds sprouted on park trees and children's laughter echoed in the sunlight. Some things don't change, and some change forever. Emily was released early for good behavior. She didn't seek pardons, media attention, or demands. She quietly followed every rule, fulfilled every obligation. When she stepped out of the prison gates, Daniel was waiting, no flowers, no banners, just a gentle look and a tight embrace. I heard through Mom. She said she looks thinner, but her eyes aren't angry anymore. After a long pause, she added, "As long as we're alive, there's a chance to start over. As long as someone still believes." A month after Emily's release, a small eatery opened in the old neighborhood. A hand-carved wooden sign hung out front, "Emily and Daniel's Place. We don't use peanuts," for someone who almost lost their life. I saw the sign in a social media photo posted by a customer with the caption, "A decent eatery." And a strange story. I didn't share or like the post, but inside I felt something stirring like a small light in thick fog. One summer day, while house hunting near that neighborhood with a client, I stopped by the roadside. The eatery sat between two old flower shops, with a green tiled roof, bright glass windows, and cascading purple bougainvillea. I stepped out of the car, not to eat, not to say anything grand. I left a small envelope with a handwritten note. "You've truly changed, I believe." Then I left without leaving my name. But I knew Emily would understand. Mark waited in the car as always, not asking when I stayed silent. We drove toward the sea, along roads shimmering in the afternoon light. That evening I stood by the living room window, moonlight painting the wooden floor silver. Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind his chin, resting on my shoulder. I said, "The scariest thing isn't being betrayed. It's losing trust in anyone." He didn't reply, just squeezed my hand a grip that always made me feel safe. I continued, my voice soft as the breeze, "But I still believe in love. Because of you. Some wounds don't heal because we forget, but because we're brave enough to remember with forgiveness, not resentment." We kept living imperfectly, but sincerely. I heard Emily and Daniel are planning free cooking classes for people with allergies. Mom started gardening in the backyard, always reminding me on calls I'm learning to listen. As for me, I still show houses brew tea for Mark every evening, keep a vase of lavender on the kitchen table. And each time I open the small drawer by my bed, where I keep Emily's first letter, I smile, not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned to forgive. An ending that doesn't close but opens. Because love may not save the past, but it can save the future. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you're going through pain, loss, or betrayal, remember there are still people who won't abandon you. Believe, live kindly, and love once more. My story isn't just about betrayal, but about forgiveness, rebirth, and courageous choices. It reminds me, and I hope you too, that true love isn't about who's perfect, but who stays when things are at their worst. I learned that blood doesn't guarantee kindness, but love can mend even the most shattered breaks. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to let go of burdens to free yourself. If you've been hurt, lost trust, don't rush to close your heart. There's always someone ready to quietly hold your hand through the darkest days. Thank you for listening to the end. If this story resonated, please subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories from the heart. And please leave a comment, I'd love to hear your story.